Hey, what's up, everybody? Time for another game theory video. If you like the videos, like, subscribe, comment, share, support the channel if you can. Appreciate it. Thanks. Super chat, PayPal, whatever. Today, we're going to talk about, and I'm going to use an example of two bad games. I know people get mad when I call these games out for being badly designed. Street Fighter Alpha 2 and Capcom vs. SNK 2. And the main idea of this video is I'm going to talk about this. Supers are too invincible in games. And I've actually, I've touched about this a little bit when I've made my video talking about how Capcom vs. SNK 2 is actually a badly designed game compared to Capcom vs. SNK 1. And I talked about Supers a bit. And so I want to actually indulge more into that. And maybe you'll learn something new, which even when I talked about this just a little bit, even people that like this game apparently did not know this. So for this discussion, we're actually going to be comparing two terrible games, Alpha 2 and Capcom vs. SNK 2. And I've always said before that Capcom vs. SNK 2 to me is a game that, because the game didn't have a lot of beta tests, if you're old enough to remember, even when I was a kid, when I heard about it coming out, I only ever remember there being a couple beta tests. And that I recall from it, I remember that Hamaru was better in the original beta, and Ryu had a blue laser beam on his Shinsho. But they got rid of that. But since there weren't a lot of beta tests, if you look at the game, it almost feels like Capcom was like, hey, we're not going to beta test this game. So we're just going to have some random person proofread the game. And they were like, hey, random person, Billy, Joe, Timmy, whatever his name was. And they're like, make this character 20% worse than they are. I don't know how you're going to do it. Just do it. And that's why, and when you see the game compared to like, sorry, I'm sick still. When you see CVS2 compared to CVS1, it almost feels like, a lot of moves, they just don't work correctly in the game. They're like, this move should just not be this bad. This move is just 20% of what it should be. The game is just, it's not a good feeling game. But the super thing that I specifically want to talk about this long forward is, let's look at a game in the supers, even as bad of a game as Alpha 2 is, right? Let's not focus on the utility of supers, because obviously the utility of supers in Alpha 2 and Capcom vs. SNK 2 is fucked up. They don't work properly. But let's just focus on the invincibility of the supers. And this is going to be a little bit crude because I'm not going to post like the projectile invincibility which grows. But let's just stay at the base invincibility while we compare these two games, okay? So if we take a game like Street Fighter Alpha 2, again, forget the utility because we know this game is badly designed, but let's look at the invincibility. Super Hurricane Kick at level 1 is 5 frames of invincibility. At level 2, it gets 7 frames of invincibility. At level 3, it gets 9 frames of invincibility, right? We can see it goes up, right? And we would assume the Super Hurricane Kick is more of a counter super, let's say. So I think it would make sense that the super gains invincibility, right? Excuse me. Now the Super Fireball doesn't matter level 1, level 2, level 3. It only has 4 frames of invincibility. I think that sounds reasonable to me. It is a Super Fireball. It goes through projectiles. He doesn't need to be super invincible. That sounds reasonable to me. Again, we're forgetting the utility of the supers in the game because the game is terrible. But now we have a super like the Shoryurepa, right? 6 frames of invincibility, level 1, 2, level 3, right? Fast forward moving super, right? Compared to the Shinryuken, right? Goes 6, 8, 14. Well, you would think that this is an anti-air super, more of a counter super, right? We might think that the Shoryurepa, oh, it's like unblockable after Super Flash and he's moving forward. It doesn't need to be that invincible since it also does this, right? This, again, I would say makes sense. Character like Adon, Rush Super, it goes 5, 7, 7, right? Rush Super, well, that's not really a Rush Super in Alpha 2, is it? I'm giving Alpha 2 too much credit. My bad. Okay. But the Jaguar Assault, is it called, right? 23, 29, 35. Well, you can't combo into it. I think it makes sense that this super is becoming very invincible. Right? Chun-Li, well, she's all over the place. 8, 18, 28. Okay. 4, 7, 13. And this is just 6 all between. This is a little random, but goddamn, I mean, she has some privilege in this game. Now, let's look at a game like CVS2. And I showed this a little bit off in the CVS1 versus CVS2 video, but this is a homogenization of video games and more modern games compared to Street Fighter 2. And again, it also, like I said, it shows that the game was almost arbitrarily or just sort of like randomly a guy was just like, hey, Jimmy, make this character, here's the rules of the rules, quotation marks, of the game, but make every character just 20% worse in some way. Pick some moves, 20% worse framed out, whatever. But CVS2 is a game where there's a standardized sort of idea of supers consistently, right? And you're going to see a trend here. Super Fireball, 7, 12, 19. Hurricane Kick, 9, 15, 23. 22. Now, obviously, this doesn't work like this in CVS1. Super Fireball is more even like a game like Alpha 2. Super Fireball is not invincible, right? Whereas Hurricane Kick is more invincible, right? Not in CVS2. CVS2, these are, let's say, generally the same. Let's look at a character like Cammy, 8, 14, 22. Both supers, 8, 14, 22. Guile, 8, 14, 22. 9, 15, 23. 23. Character like Kim, 8, 14, 8, 14, 20, 8, 14, 22. Okay. Rock, 6, 14, 22. 8, 15, 23. Ryo, 7, 12, 19. 8, 14, 22, 32, because that moves so slow. Do you see, though? And hopefully, if you're understand a little bit about video games, why is this a fucking problem? Why is this a problem? Well, let's just think about just how invincible these moves are in the first place, right? When you start getting to a level 2, if you have a move that's 14 frames invincible, 15 frames invincible, 12 frames invincible even, guess what? I think we could say that, if we're being reasonable and we're being, realistic, if a move has 14 frames of invincibility, it's not going to lose to any other move unless it's actually another Dragon Punch or a super, right? I mean, 14 frames is a lot of invincibility in a video game, right? So if we think about it like that, do we see that there's already a kind of a conundrum here? Why should a Super Fireball be as, and I know people are like, oh, it's a few frames different. I know, but see what I'm getting at. It's already invincible enough that it's irrelevant, right? This is irrelevant. Why do you think you actually see people in CVS2? They're like, I could anti-air with this, but then I can anti-air with my Super Fireball. Do you think you should be able to anti-air with a Super Fireball? Do you think that's kind of a little stupid, right? If we look at a character like Kim, right, why should his rush super be as invincible as the actual counter anti-air super? Don't you think that's kind of fucking stupid? Right? Why a character like Rock? Because we have this sort of, almost homogenization of supers, and I know you're going to be, oh, it's a few frames different. Why is my actual counter super here less invincible than the rush super? Does this seem retarded to you? You're telling me that I can still anti-air with Shine Knuckle. I mean, I guess if the guy was technically jumping over me as a cross-up anti-air, I guess the Raging Storm would be better. Maybe if I anticipated a roll. But I mean, God, if I'm anticipating a roll, why don't I just wait for the guy to roll and then he's on the other side and I tap to super in the first place. But cross-up anti-air, maybe we can give it to this. But let's be honest, besides that, I mean, I can still anti-air with Shine Knuckle. And it's more invincible. And it does more damage. Rush super, again, more invincible. Yeah, the guy's throwing a fireball at me. I guess I could beat it with, my Super Fireball, but I could actually rush through it and still go through the fireball. Do you see that CVS2 this is another example of what I've talked about. CVS2 is not a good game. CVS2 is full of shit that doesn't make any fucking sense, right? CVS2 is another fairy tale game when people talk about it. It's not a good game, right? Even as bad of a game as Alpha 2, we can see a little bit of a thought process, right? Now, of course, it's sort of null and void because we have, we have the, let's make a better picture of that. We have custom combos, right? So because we have, custom combos, which also are invincible, which also, are unblockable if you're not blocking them before the screen freeze, which also do more damage, which also are more safe, which also gives every character the best move in the game, right? I mean, shit like this should not exist in game. It's terrible, but pretending that it doesn't and pretending that supers are actually, more useful in Alpha 2, we can still see that there's a little bit of thought process, right? Why should a super fireball be as invincible as my counter super? Why should a super that's unblockable before, if you're not blocking before the screen freeze, why should it be more invincible than the actual counter super, right? There's still a little bit of thought process here, right? Why should the super that you can't combo into be less invincible than well, it's not a rush super in this game because the game is terribly made as well, but do you get what I'm getting at? But not fucking, Capcom versus SNK2. Like I said, this doesn't even exist. Even in a game going from like Capcom versus SNK1 to this, supers are still better designed. Not just the utility, which the utility does encompass the invincibility of moves, of course, right? But, the supers are more thought out, just utility in terms of damage and everything like that. And in a game like CVS1, but in CVS2, it's like the guy that was making the game, they were like, hey, supers are supposed to be 8, 14, 22. And you can look at the game, and like I said, probably 90% of the characters it says 8, 14, 22 is the invincibility of supers. And it's another reason why I said if you actually look at the game, it's like they gave this Timmy or Jimmy, they're like, hey, this is the game, and we're not going to beta test it. So make every character somehow 20% worse. And you got Timmy's and they're like, oh, fuck. I got to take away a couple frames. Take away a couple frames on this rock super here. Take away a couple frames on this fucking super here. Take away a couple frames on this normal. Take away a couple frames here. Oh, I made this super. I took away 3 frames on this one. So I'm only going to take 1 frame away here. And it's just, the game is full of moves that do not fucking work properly. And it also shows a homogenization that makes no sense. Why is my rush super more invincible than my fucking counter super? It's retarded. And besides that, like I said, and the thing is, once you have a move that's 14 frames invincible in the first place, what are you losing to? Like, how badly are you timing this? If something is 14 frames of invincibility, it's probably only losing to another super. And this is not, we're not playing fucking a Dragon Ball fucking 3D game where you do my super versus your super, or, of course there are times that, you do super another person's super, but, it's a bit more obscure and random. It's not like an actual meta of the game. Hey, I'm saving my super so you can my super. It's not like a my meter versus your meter and that, sort of mindset, but. Anyway, there's something I wanted to talk about before because I've actually had a guy he's even commented before that he did not know that CVS2 had a sort of standard idea of supers and that even level 1s had invincibility. And I was like, I feel like this is just day one, right? When you play the game, you're like, oh, it's basically little invincibility, invincible, very invincible. That's just the basic idea of the game. It's like, it's kind of just, Now there's not actual thought to it. It's just kind of like the whole thing. It's retarded. Anyway, if you like the videos, like, sub, comment, share. Support the channel if you want. I appreciate it. Thanks. If you learned something new, super like the video. Anyway, the end.